Yeah.
Okay, so let's take a look at these, the handout here. And we're not going to do all of these together, but we want to make sure you've got a pretty good feel of what you're doing, and then you're going to take the rest for homework, because we want to make sure we have time to get to the other two approaches to value. Remember, we've only done one of the three so far. Alright, so look at number one. What's the correct adjustment to be made to the value of an 1,800 square foot comparable property which sold in an area where living area is valued at $110 per square foot if it's being compared to a subject property which is 1,700 square feet? So when we look at a question like this, we want to always set up subject and comp, right? Now the only difference they gave us was square footage, and they told us the subject was 1,700 square feet and the comp was how big? 1,800. So we need to make an adjustment for that, correct? All right. So subject is 1,700, comp is 1,800. So which way am I adjusting? Down. That's going to be a negative adjustment. So minus the value of 100 square feet. So that's going to be 110 times what? 100. So that's going to be minus $11,000. Does that make sense?
Yep.
That's my adjustment. Minus $11,000. They didn't ask me for an indicated value because they didn't give me a sales price. They just wanted to know what the adjustment was going to be.
But could we be expected to provide that value?
You can't. You can't possibly get that value from what they've given you.
Not just based on the square footage, you wouldn't just go ahead.
No, you don't. You don't. So here's a great question, and this is one of the things that we tend to want to do. These are not tinker toys. We don't build houses out of blocks. We don't sit here and go, whoa, it's 1,700 square feet, so I can just multiply that times 110. That 110 is our adjustment number. That's very different than a value per square foot, okay? So the only thing they want here is the adjustment. They just want to know negative $11,000. They want to know the adjustment. Okay? Everybody good with that? Number two, what's the correct adjustment to be made to a recently sold comp that has 3 baths if the subject property has 2.5? Well, subject has how many baths?
2.
Okay. Alright, so we're going to do full and
1
half. Alright, how many full does the subject have? 2. How many halves does it have? 1. On the comp, how many full does it have? 3. And how many halves? 0. So now you see how I set it up. We got to make 2 adjustments, correct? So let's start with the full. The subject is 2. The comp is what? 3. So which way do I need to adjust? Down by the value of a full bath, and that's going to be minus $8,000. Everybody okay with that adjustment? And then on the half, the subject is 1. The comp is 0. So which way am I adjusting? Up by the value of a half bath, so that's going to be plus 5,500. So they want to know the correct total adjustment. Looks like to me if I add those together, it's going to be minus $2,500. That make sense? Minus 2,500. Alright, I'll let you do number 3 for homework. Number 4. I'll tell you about number 4. It says the subject property of a CMA has a lot that is $5,000 better than the lot of a recently sold comparable property. What would be the appropriate adjustment to make in this CMA? Is the adjustment made to the comparable property sales price or to the subject property? We'll answer the second part first. It's made to the what? It's made to the comp, right? So here's my problem with this question. I don't like this language. The subject has a lot that's $5,000 better, right? Make it about what? The comp. How do I rewrite that sentence to be about the comp?
$5,000.
is $5,000 worse, right? Make it about the comp, flip it around. Now, subject's here, because subject is always here. Comp is what? Below or worse, so it's going to be plus, how much money? $5,000. So the adjustment is plus $5,000. How do we feel about that? Just restate it in language of the comp. Alright, you guys should be able to do 5 and 6 for homework. Let's look at number 7. Number 7 is an appreciation question. It says a prospective seller has asked a broker to help him estimate a reasonable selling price for his property. Properties in the local market are appreciating at a rate of 2% per year. Using the sales comparison approach to value and using just one comparable property that sold for $187,200 7 months ago, what adjustment should the broker make to account for appreciation in value? So first of all, appreciation, is it going to be plus or minus? Plus. That's going to be a plus adjustment, right? Things are going up in value. So now, if it had sold a full year ago, how much would it have gone up in value? 2%. So that's what we want to do. We want to do that full year first. So 187,200 times the 2%. And we have $3,744 annually, right? So per year. What do I want to do with that? I want to divide it by 12 to get it down to monthly. And that's $312 a month, right? And how many months ago did it sell? 7. So times 7 months. So my adjustment on this thing is going to be plus $2,184 for the appreciation. Does that make sense for everybody? Are we good on that one? Everybody okay on appreciation? So you just always, when you're working with appreciation or depreciation, you always want to find a full year's worth and then break it down to the monthly, and then whatever number of months they say. Okay? Good? Alright. Number 8, you should be able to do for homework. Alright. Number 9, you should be able to do for homework. Number 10, you should be able to do for homework. Now, let's look at number 11. Number 11 starts to present things from a different perspective. It says if a 1,400 square foot home sells for $165,000 and a 1,500 square foot home with similar features in the same neighborhood sells for $175,000, what is the value of finished living area per square foot in this neighborhood? Well, what's the difference in these two houses? 1,000 square feet, right? So
100 square feet.
100 square feet, sorry. I did the same thing y'all did. 100 square feet. Does that make sense for everybody? And how much did a buyer pay for that extra 100 square feet?
$10,000.
$10,000. So if we know that 100 square feet costs $10,000, can we figure out how much 1 square foot costs? How would we do that?
Take away 2 zeros in, 2 zeros
For those of us not in the business of taking away zeros, we would do what? Divide the 10,000 by what? By 100. Yes, divide the 10,000 by 100. And what do we come up with for 1 square foot? $100. same thing. It works. Okay, good? Everybody all right with that?
So you wouldn't subtract the price of the two houses and try to, that wouldn't work that way, would it?
That's pretty much what I did,
Oh.
basically, because I took, subtracting the two, you get $10,000 difference,
Yeah.
right? And then that difference accounted for the 100 square feet. And so I divided each one divided by 100 to get the value of 1 square foot.
Yeah.
Okay, is everybody all right with that? And it would be the same question if it said one had 3 bathrooms and the other had 2 bathrooms and there was a $10,000 difference. How much would the bathroom be worth? $10,000 if that was the only difference between the two. That's how you find these valuation adjustments, is you find 2 identical houses except for one characteristic, and then you figure out what was that one thing worth.
Okay.
Alright? Then number 12. Look at number 12. It's just your everyday run-of-the-mill CMA question. You got 3 comps. It was even nice enough to put it in a little table for you. You didn't have to do any work there. So, normally when we do a CMA, the first thing we start doing is making adjustments, right? So, if we look at, like for example, the subject property is 1,200 square feet, and comp number 1 is 1,300 square feet. Do we need to make an adjustment for that?
Yes.
We do. By 100 square foot, right? How much? How much?
100
100 what?
square feet.
Yeah, but how much is a square foot worth?
Oh,
We don't know that yet.
Oh,
Divide.
they didn't tell us.
Gotta figure out.
We gotta figure them out. We've got to come up with the adjustments. Now, go back to that last question we just looked at. We saw 2 identical houses, right? With the exception of square footage. If they were identical with the exception of square footage, then the price difference must have been about the square footage. Does that make sense? Now look at the information we have here.
1 and 2.
If I look at, for example, comp number 1 and comp number 3, are they pretty similar houses?
Yes.
Well, this is the same, this is the same, this is the same, this is the same. The only thing I see that's different is here. Well,
And the price.
and here.
The 8,000 divided by 200.
So, how much more money were we willing to pay for comp number 1?
8,000.
$8,000. Why were we willing to pay $8,000 more for comp 1? What in the world's the difference between them? It's bigger, right? And it's how much bigger? 200 square feet. Well, if I was willing to pay $8,000 for 200 square feet, how much am I willing to pay for 1 square foot? How would you get there? Divide it. You would divide the $8,000 divided by 200. The same way you would figure out how much anything costs. You take the total price and you divide by the number of ones you bought, right? So how much is that per square foot? $40 per square foot. Well, guess what? I'm going to erase now so I can get rid of all this junk so you can see. Look at now the subject property and comp number 1. What's the only thing we need to adjust for? Square footage. Can we adjust for square footage now?
Yeah.
Because we know how much a square foot is worth, don't we? So, subject is 1,200 square feet. How big is the comp? 13, so it's better, right? Which way am I adjusting? Down by the value of how many square feet?
4,000.
How many square feet? 100 square feet, right? At how much per square foot? 40 bucks. So that is going to be minus how much money? $4,000. Do we need to make an adjustment for bedrooms?
No.
No. Do we need to make an adjustment for bathrooms?
No.
No, we do not, right? So I come up with $16,000
Yep.
for comp number one. Does that make sense for everybody?
Yes.
Because it's sold for 120, and my only adjustment is -4, so we're at 116. Is everybody good on that? We're not done though, right? We got 2 more comps to deal with. Is everybody okay with that? Now look at number 2. We need to make a square footage adjustment, don't we?
Yeah.
Because if you look at the subject, how big is the subject? 1,200. How big is comp number 2? 1,300. So which way are we adjusting? Down.
$4,000.
$4,000. We know what that adjustment is because we just used it, right?
Yeah.
So that's minus $4,000. Do we need to make an adjustment for bedrooms?
No.
We do not. Do we need to make an adjustment for baths?
Yes.
That's a problem because they didn't tell us what?
How much?
How much a bath is worth. Can we figure it out?
Yes.
How do we figure it out?
You take the 2,
Can we find 2 properties that are identical with the exception of a bathroom?
yes.
It looks like to me comp 1
And
and 2 are identical except for a bathroom, right?
By 10,000.
And how much is that bathroom worth?
10,000.
$10,000 because they paid $10,000 more for comp 1 with 2 baths than they did for comp 2 with 1 bath. Does that make sense? So I'm going to write down here 1 bath equals $10,000. Now can I make that adjustment?
Yes.
So when I look at my subject property, I'm back over here looking at my subject property. How many bedrooms is it?
2.
I mean, not bedrooms, sorry.
Bath.
How many bathrooms is it?
2.
2. And then how many baths is my comp?
1.
1. So which way am I adjusting?
Up.
Up by the value of a bath, which is what?
10,000.
Plus $10,000. So I start at 110. Right?
26.
116.
116.
116, right? 110 minus 4 is 106 plus 10 is 116. Now, you know, me being kind of the jerk I am, should I do number 3? Yes.
Yes.
But would you?
Would I on the test?
No.
Because when I get to 2 and they give me the same number and that's one of the answers, bingo. Right? But now if we do number 3, do we need to make a size adjustment?
Yes.
Yes. In this case, the subject is 1,200 square feet. How big's the comp? 1,100. So which way are we going? Up by the value of 200 square feet. So plus $8,000. And then do we need to make an adjustment for anything else?
No.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. It's not plus. It's not, it's plus 4,000. Sorry. Plus 4,000.
But it's only 100 square feet, right?
Right. 100 square feet. 100 square feet.
Oh.
So what do we end up with? 160.
Again.
Magically, right? Shockingly, they're all the same. So what's our answer there? 116. See, here's the thing. That looks so confusing when you think they don't give you the adjustments. But folks, this is just comparison shopping. You do this all the time. Because here's how I know you do this all the time. If you went and you looked at 2 televisions at Best Buy, and one came with a Roku stick in the box and the other one didn't, and the one that came with the Roku stick was $200 more than the one that didn't, what would you say that you're paying for the Roku stick? $200. And then you'd look on the shelf and go, the damn Roku stick's $90. Why would I do that, right? And see, you all know how to do that. This is absolutely no different. You're just isolating how they're similar, how they're different, and then coming up with what somebody paid for that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay? All right. You should be able to do number 13 for homework. Now, we need to go to the new stuff. So back over in your slides, we want to talk about the second of these approaches to value. The second one is called the cost approach. Now we said the cost approach was used for what kind of properties? Special use properties, right? They're not residential, and we don't what? We don't make money off of them. Good. They're not residential. We don't make money off of them. So these are going to be like public facilities. All right? Primarily for insurance purposes. The math of this is going to be pretty straightforward. Now we are going to have to do some definitions in this section, some vocabulary that's important. But the math is 3 steps. You need to memorize these 3 steps. Okay? Step 1 is going to be the value of the land as if it's vacant. So we want the land value separate from the structure value. Okay? Well, only when we're doing the cost approach. It's the only one we do this way. So we would not value a house like this. Does that make sense for everybody? Okay? Step 1, land value. Step 2, we want to figure out what is the replacement cost of the structure. And the way we're going to do that is just dollar per square foot. How many square feet is the building? How much per square foot? Very simple math that we've done plenty of times before. That's step 2. Step 3 is how much has the building depreciated? These kinds of structures. So let me, again, relate it to something in the real world. How many of you have car insurance, like comprehensive car insurance, okay? If you wreck your car today, your insurance company is going to buy you a brand new one off the lot, right? Why not? They depreciate the value of it. See, don't tell me you don't understand this mess, because you do. It's the same thing. Why do we do the cost approach? Primarily for what purposes?
Insurance.
Insurance. So what do you think the insurance company is going to do once we calculate the replacement cost of that building? We're going to factor in depreciation based on how old the building is. Because if that building burns down, the insurance company's not going to build you a brand new building. They're going to pay you what the depreciated value of that building was. Does that make sense for everybody? That's the way insurance companies work. So when we do the cost approach, we start with the vacant land value, and then we're going to add in the replacement cost of the building. And then we're going to subtract the depreciation of the building. Here's what you're not going to depreciate. What never depreciates?
Value of the land.
Land. You don't depreciate the land, just the building, just the structure. Does that make sense for everybody? Okay. So let's go through the vocabulary and then we'll do the math. Okay. You need to know the difference between a replacement cost and a reproduction cost. Now when we do the math, it's always going to be replacement cost. In theory, we could value something using its reproduction cost. We would do this in historic type properties. Reproduction means you are building it exactly as it was, using the exact same materials that was used previously. Replacement just means trading a 4,000 square foot building for a 4,000 square foot building. You would use modern building practices. You would use whatever was most cost effective. Whereas reproduction means you would painstakingly reproduce piece by piece exactly as it was. Which one sounds more expensive? Reproduction, significantly more expensive. What's going on with the sniffles around the room all of a sudden?
Sniffled once, guys.
No, I mean, it's not just you. It's like vibrating around the room all of a sudden. I mean, there's like a chorus going on out here. So I just made everybody self-conscious about it. Sorry. I'm sorry, it just caught my attention. Like, So, the square foot method. This is by far the most common way of calculating a replacement cost. And this is the way we're going to do it with the math in this chapter. The square foot method just gives you a dollar per square foot number and the total square footage of the building. And if you think about it, that's pretty much how we always deal with cost of structures, right? I mean, we rarely ever hear anything else about the cost of a structure other than square foot. There are more detailed methods, okay? You're not going to use them. just so you know what they are, they're called the quantity survey or the unit in place method, okay? If you see those on a test, you don't need to be able to define them, okay? You don't need, let me give you what I mean about more detailed. The quantity survey method, when you were calculating the replacement cost of that building, now you don't need to know it's $80 a square foot. That's not close enough. There's room for error there. You need to know there are 7,008,452 board feet of lumber. There are 26,343 man hours of labor. There are 72,800 pounds of nails. There are, do you see how detailed that is?
Yeah.
Now, is that going to give you a very accurate portrayal of what it would cost to build that building back?
Yeah.
Yes. It would also cause you to shoot yourself
I just,
before you finished coming up with the value.
That sounds like the
It's-
government.
That's exactly what it is. The military uses this because they have detailed records of that kind of thing. So when they're coming up with a value to replace something, they know how many rivets went into that thing. Does that make sense? Because they keep records like that. In the real world of real estate, you would never see these used. You're going to see the square foot method. And when we do math on this test, you're always going to see the square foot method. But just be aware of those terminologies in case you see them on a test. The one we're going to use, though, is going to be the square foot method. Okay? Everybody good with that? All right. So, depreciation. Depreciation is any loss in value that happens over time. I want you to do me a favor and highlight some words on this slide, okay? I want you to highlight this word obsolescence. Shows up a couple times on this slide. I want you to highlight this word obsolescence. It's a funny sounding word. What do you think the root of it is? Obsolete. When things are obsolete, what does that mean about them? We don't like them anymore, right? We don't want them anymore. They're not desirable. They're not desirable. That's what obsolete means. If something's obsolete, has it lost value?
no.
If something's obsolete, it has not all of it, but it has a lesser amount of value. Does that make sense? We have lost some of, so that is a form of depreciation, because depreciation is any loss of value that happens over time. And there are several reasons that a property can lose value. The most obvious one is something called physical deterioration. What do buildings or structures do over time naturally? They deteriorate. There's some period of time where that building is going to remain upright, and then one day it's going to do what? Fall down. You know, physically the property is going to deteriorate. But that's not the only piece of the puzzle when you talk about depreciating property, because properties very often become useless long before they fall down. If they didn't, we wouldn't have abandoned buildings, vacant buildings. How often do you drive through cities, towns, where you have warehouses that have long since been abandoned? What happened? Why are they abandoned? They're obsolete. The purpose that they were constructed for no longer exists. So they've become obsolete. Or maybe warehouses still exist, but those were built along rail lines, and now you need the warehouses, and they were built along rail lines downtown. Where are warehouses likely to be now? Out in the middle of nowhere, beside an interstate, right? Because we don't haul nearly as much freight via rail now, we haul it how? On trucks. Does that make sense? So that's obsolescence in action. Obsolescence is when the purpose of the thing is no longer desirable. Does that make sense for everybody? When the purpose is no longer either desirable at all or is just less desirable. That is called obsolescence. Its use is obsolete. Now, you can have two types of obsolescence. You can have functional obsolescence or economic obsolescence. Everybody good on what obsolescence is? It's just a loss in value because the property is no longer what? Desirable. For whatever reason, it's no longer desirable. So let's talk about functional obsolescence. Functional obsolescence is the property itself is no longer desirable because of some feature on the property. So give me an example of a functional obsolescence maybe for an office building. Think of the worst possible thing you could think of for an office building that would make it completely functionally obsolete in modern society. No air conditioning. Bingo. Number one. Would there have been office buildings built at some point that don't have air conditioning? Absolutely. Are they desirable in today's marketplace? No. Would that be an example of a functional obsolescence? Does that make sense? Now, functional obsolescence, it comes in two varieties. It's either curable or incurable. Now, that doesn't mean fixable or not fixable. Technically, everything is fixable. The question is, at what cost? How much money? Because an incurable functional obsolescence is one where the cost is simply not worth it. The cost outweighs the benefit. Putting air conditioning in that building would cost more than the whole building is what? Is worth. That's an incurable functional obsolescence. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Now, an office building that has, when you go in the lobby, it has 1980s brass fixtures everywhere. It has, y'all remember the carpet that used to be on the walls of the skating rink? You know, office buildings used to have that too, right? There are still office buildings around that have that like nappy carpet, you know what I'm talking about? The sandpaper carpet right on the walls in the lobbies. Is that an obsolescence?
Yes.
Yes, because it's not desirable. Does it diminish the value of the property? Sure it does. Is it a functional obsolescence? Yes, because it's about the property itself. Is it curable or incurable? That's an example of a curable functional obsolescence because what? The cost is not going to be so great that it would be worth not doing it. Does that make sense?
Are they typically cosmetic?
Most curable functional obsolescences are cosmetic type things. Exactly. Brass fixtures or linoleum floors and those kinds of things. Wallpaper. Ooh, wallpaper is a perfect example of a curable
Shiplap?
Functional obsolescence.
It will be.
Shiplap will definitely be a functional obsolescence at some point when people get sick of the magnolia crowd, you know. Hey, I'm sorry? Popcorn ceilings is a great example of a functional obsolescence that is curable because the cost of doing it is not so great that it wouldn't be worth doing. Does that make sense for everybody? Whereas a 5-bedroom house with 1 bathroom, that's a functional obsolescence, but it's probably a what? That's probably a incurable functional obsolescence because the cost would be far too great. Yes?
Would that be a curable obsolescence?
So, a handicap ramp, are you saying a property that does have one or does not have one? A property that does not have one, I wouldn't say that's an obsolescence at all. Because a handicap ramp is not something that most buyers desire. Remember, an obsolescence is something that reduces the value of a property. Do you look at a property and say, oh, it doesn't have a handicap ramp, so it's worth less money?
Like a commercial property, something like that.
Okay, so a commercial property, first of all, it would be illegal. That's not called an obsolescence, that's called an illegality, because according to what law? The Americans with Disabilities Act, right? See, I want to make sure you're thinking about an obsolescence in the right way. An obsolescence is something, now, on a home, I would say the exact opposite is true. A handicap ramp would be a functional obsolescence for most buyers on a home, would it not?
Sure would.
Because most buyers would not want it. What would be the first thing most buyers would say about that ramp when they see it if they're looking at buying that house? How much does it cost to get rid of it? So that ramp would actually be considered a functional obsolescence for most buyers. And so therefore, would it be curable or incurable, you think? Most likely a curable one, because the cost would probably be small related to the value of the property. Does that make sense? That help? Yes. Okay.
How do you determine if the cost is like too high to be curable? Is it like when it's more than what you paid for it?
How would you
You
determine
get
it?
like-
If you bought a
you
car
said
for $5,000 and it needed a new engine for $7,000, would you do it?
Nah. But
How did you?
Yeah.
How did you determine that?
About the bathroom though, and the bathroom would cost more than the whole house. You said it was
Very well could. 5 bedrooms, 1 bath? Probably could.
Plumbing, absolutely.
Plumbing, electricity, that could be a $50,000 renovation, easily.
Depends on the property, right, also?
It also, and again, so it's very subjective, it depends on the property, right? And so, the reason I asked you the question about the car is, see how fast he came in? No, I wouldn't do that. That's exactly the question you would ask yourself to determine if something was curable or incurable. Because you would know what your property's worth, roughly, and then you would know what it would cost to fix this thing, and that would make the determination as to whether it's a curable or incurable. But they're both called a what? A functional obsolescence. They're obsolescences because what do they do to the value of the property? They reduce it. What makes them functional is that they're on the property itself. So what do you think that means about an economic obsolescence? It's not on the property. An economic obsolescence is something that's negatively impacting the value that's outside of the property. There's a huge economic obsolescence up here in North Raleigh for all of these properties around here.
Airport.
The airport. If you buy a house in North Raleigh in Briar Creek, is there something that's reducing the value of that property? Yes, and if you don't believe it, go show one of those houses. When the pictures start vibrating on the wall, because they do,
People still buy them.
They still pay a fortune
and
for those
yes, they
houses.
still buy them. But here's the question. See, you got to get out of that tiny little way of thinking that we all have. I didn't say an obsolescence reduces the value to nothing. I said it what? Reduces the value. And here's how you know it reduced the value. Would they pay more for it if it didn't have that problem? What do you think the answer is? Absolutely, and that's how you know it's an obsolescence. A hog farm nearby, is that going to be an economic obsolescence? Absolutely. People are going to, well, you might not be able to stand the smell of it by the time you get it, right? You know, a paper mill, would that be an economic, for those of you who don't know, that stinks worse than a hog farm does. Oh, God. Oh. Paper mill might be the grossest smelling thing on the sulfur. They use sulfur in the manufacturing process. It smells like a fresh fart 24 hours a day. There's just no other way around it. It's just, you know, rotten eggs galore. You know? Yeah.
Has an Eastman Chemical Company,
Yeah.
and even Johnson City Lieutenant Kingsport, people will say they won't come to Kingsport because it stinks.
Right, and so that negatively impact, those are obsolescences. And what makes it an economic obsolescence is, it's not on my property, right? So therefore, is it curable or incurable? It's incurable because I can't control it. Everybody good on this idea of an obsolescence? They tend to like to test on that just because it's a fancy word, okay? Everybody good on that? All right. So, as far as calculating depreciation from your standpoint, and with a math question, because remember I said the 3 steps were going to be, step 1 was determine the what?
The vacant value.
Vacant land value. Step 2 was going to be to calculate the replacement cost, and then step 3 was going to be subtract what? Depreciation. So we need to talk about some words, some vocabulary that go along with the depreciation piece of things. The first one is effective age. Let me first be clear about something we don't care about. We don't care about actual age. When we're talking about depreciation, I don't care how old the building is, okay? I don't care if it was built 20 years ago or 200 years ago, because that's its actual age and that doesn't matter.
Yes.
That makes you feel better, right? What we care about is a property's effective age. Its effective age is how far it is into its economic life. So the economic life is really where we need to start. The economic life is how long we expect that property to remain economically useful. Every property has an expected economic lifespan. Is that going to be different than its actual lifespan?
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. Every property is going to have a much longer actual lifespan than its economic lifespan. If you're building a shopping mall, for example, how long do you think the economic lifespan of that might be? 50 years is pretty high, actually. You know, 20, 25, you know, something like that. I mean, they're going to tear Triangle Town Center down soon. You know, it'll probably be closed in the next 5 years and torn down.
Maybe that's why our mall died,
So,
because it needs to be torn down.
you know, most malls are, right?
Yeah.
And so their economic lifespans are
Died.
dying, right?
Mhm.
It's not that the property's going to fall down. The buildings were probably in fine shape. But their economic purpose has dried up. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Now, just like economic life doesn't have anything to do with actual life, effective age doesn't have anything to do with actual age. Effective age is how far you are into your economic life. Here's the interesting thing, and Donna will really like, about effective age. You can roll that clock back anytime you want to. You get a little work done, right? If you want to change your effective age, you know, you get work done. So on a property, what does that mean? You do what? You renovations, right? So if I wanted to effectively roll back the age of a property to change its effective age, I would renovate the property. You can always do that, because essentially what you're doing is taking years off, but also adding years on. You're adding more economic life back into the property by bringing it more up to today's standards. Does that make sense? Okay? So, you need to know that economic life and effective age are what matters, not actual age. Are we good on that? All right. So, when you calculate depreciation, first of all, every property depreciates from 100 to 0. It starts at 100% value at the beginning, and it ends down here at the end at what? 0. Okay? So, when they tell you that the economic life of a property is a certain number of years, that's the amount of time that it takes it to go from 100 to 0. Does everybody follow me on that? So the first thing you want to do is take 100 and divide it by the economic life. All right. Take 100 and divide it by the economic life. How many years does it take to go from 100 to 0? That's going to give you the annual depreciation. That makes sense? So just as an example, if we had an economic life of 50 years, what's 100 divided by 50?
2.
2. So we've got 2% annual depreciation.
That's expressed as a rate.
Could we calculate 2% of something?
Yes.
If we knew something like a replacement cost of a building, could we calculate 2% of it? Does that make sense? So let me give you an example. We'll stick with our 50-year economic life here. Let's say we have a property that's 2,000 square feet that can be replaced for $75 per square foot. It has an economic life of 50 years and an effective age of 18 years. calculate how much that property has depreciated. Okay? Well, in order to calculate how much is depreciated, we need to know what was its starting point. Does that make sense? How are we going to calculate the starting point? 2,000 square feet at what? At $75 a square foot. Does that make sense? So, 2,000 square feet times $75 a square foot. What did it start out being worth? $150,000? Does everybody see that?
Yeah.
Started when it was brand spanking new. It was worth $150,000. Is it still worth $150,000? No, because it's done what? It has aged or depreciated. Okay? So to figure out how much it's depreciated, we need to look at its economic life. How long did it take it to go all the way down to zero? 50 years, right? Well, what percentage did it start at? 100. And we divide that by how long it took it to go to zero, so divided by what? 50. And that's how much per year? 2% annually. Does that make sense? Can we take 2% of that number? How much is it depreciating annually? $3,000 per year. And how many years has it done that? 18, because its effective age is 18 years, right? So it's done it for 18 years. What are we going to do with this $3,000? Times 18. How much depreciation do we have? $54,000 in depreciation. So no matter what they give you as the economic life, you're going to divide that into what? No matter what they give you as the economic life, what are you going to divide that into? 100. And that gives you your annual rate of depreciation. And then you're just going to apply that rate back to the value of the property to come up with the depreciation. So in this case, we had 2% annually, which equated to how much money? $3,000. And then once we've got the annual depreciation, we go back and multiply that by the effective age. If they give you the actual age, what do you do with it? Get rid of it. Because the actual age doesn't matter. What matters is the economic life and the effective age. Those are the two things that matter, not the actual age. Alright? So we've got an example here. It says a building has a replacement value of $125 per square foot and it's 2,000 square feet. The building has an effective age, an economic life of 50 years and an effective age of 15 years. How much has the building depreciated? Well, it's pretty much the same thing we just did on this example. We have to first come up with the replacement cost, right? And how do we do that? Multiply cost per square foot times square footage. Cost per square foot times square footage. So, $125 a square foot times, how many square feet do we have? 2,000. That is a replacement value of $250,000. Okay? Now, we need to take 100 and divide it by the economic life, right? So that's how much depreciation per year? 2%. And on this particular property, 2% per year equates to $5,000 a year, right? And how many years has it done that? For 15 years, so that's $75,000 in total depreciation that that property's taken. Everybody okay with that?
So when you calculate the depreciation, how are you taking that each year? I mean, are you deducting that?
Oh, you mean as a tax deduction?
Yeah.
You're deducting it as loss.
Are you doing it over the, no, I know that, but I mean, are you doing it over the economic life, are you doing it over the 15-year period?
Yeah, that depends on how you want to structure your taxes. You have that option on your tax return.
You sure?
You can deduct it on a shorter amount of time or on a quicker amount of time. The new tax plan would allow you to deduct it over a 10-year time period if you choose to. The IRS has certain timetables. But for our purposes, we do it based on whatever economic life they give us. Okay, everybody good with that?
So if there was a question that also had the land value, like.
We're going to.
Okay.
We're getting there. We're
Okay.
getting there. We
Sorry.
gotta know how to do the appreciation before we put it all together.
Okay.
So now we're getting ready to put it all together, right? So what did we say step one was? Land value. And then step two is what? Replacement value. And then step three is going to be to subtract the depreciation of the structure. All right? So let's look at the one that you've got, or one of the ones you've got in your little packet here. All right? Number 14. Number 14 says a worship facility is being valued for the purposes of determining the cost of insuring the facility. The building is located on a lot that's valued at $96,000, contains 4,200 square feet of usable area, and it's 15 years into an expected economic life of how long?
50 years.
50 years. Using this information and knowing that the cost of replacing our structure itself is based on local building costs of $110 per square foot, what's the estimate of value for this property using the replacement square foot method of the cost approach? So, write down the 3 steps. What is step number 1 when we're doing the cost approach? Land value, right? So number 1, land value. What's number 2? Replacement cost. And then number 3 is what? Subtract the depreciation. So now we're going to go back to the question and start to pull those things out. You can't make sense of these big long paragraphs without writing down some kind of formula. It just won't work. You've got to write the formula out. So, as I start reading, a worship facility is being valued for purposes of determining cost of insuring it. The building is located on a lot that's valued at $96,000. Well, what am I going to do with the $96,000? That's my land value. Step 1, done. Right? That's it. Nothing else for step 1. Contains 4,200 square feet of usable area. Okay, so the 4,200 square feet, what line is that going to go on? 2, the replacement cost, right? 4,200 times something. What is it going to be times? $110 a square foot. So, what is the replacement cost of this thing? 110 equals $462,000. Are we done with step 2?
Yes.
Yep, sure are. Step 2, done. Now step 3, the last one, which is the more complex one, is the depreciation. What numbers did they give us that matter here? It's 15 years into an expected economic life. Okay, so economic life of 50 years, is that important?
Yes.
Yes. 15 years into it, that's the effective age, right? Okay, so 50-year economic life, I'm going to take 100 and divide by what? 50. So that gives me 2% annually. Okay? 2% of what number? $462,000, because that's what's depreciating. Just the structure, not the structure and the land, just the structure. So we've got $462,000 annually times what rate? 2%. So that's for 1 year. Okay, so that equals $9,240 per year, right? And how many years has it been doing it?
15.
For 15 years, so times 15. I've got 138,600 for my depreciation, right? So I'm going to go back up here, 138,600. Can I do the math now? Land plus replacement minus depreciation. Does that make sense? So 96,000 plus 462,000 minus 138,600. I come up with a total value for that property of $419,400. Everybody okay with that? So far we've done two approaches to value. The sales comparison approach is where you're doing what? Making the adjustments, right? You've got your subject property, you've got your comps, and you're making the adjustments. The cost approach is just 3 steps, right? Step 1 is the land value, step 2 is replacement cost, and step 3 is subtract the depreciation just of the structure, right? Everybody good with that? Okay, so then you should be able to do number 15 for your homework, and you should also be able to take a quick break, because when we come back, we got 1 to go. The income capitalization approach. One break. Pause the camera.
So you're adding the value of the land and the replacement cost, because the replacement cost is how much the building's actually worth. Then you're gonna minus the